What's going on, YouTube? I'm your host, the Mad, the Dashing, Dash Jovis, and we're back for more tier slop. So today we're going to be talking about splashable engines, and basically the only requirement I had for an engine to meet this list is I have to have actually seen it on the ranked ladder since Ryzeal dropped, because that's the format we're in, is the Ryzeal Malice format. And if I've seen it since Ryzeal Malice has dropped, then I'm going to rank it. So that gives us a little bit over 20 engines that I think are very splashable, and we're going to talk about how good I think they are. S is obviously a splashable engine that I think is extremely good in the format, and D is a splashable engine that I think is not very good in the format. And we're going to start with Adventure, and I'm going to say pretty solidly C. You have to run a lot of bad cards to go with your good cards if you're running the Adventure engine. And 3-axis decks have some reasons to run the Adventure engine, and putting the negate up with Wandering Griffin Rider is pretty good, and Draco back is pretty good. But I think in general you're not going to be running the Adventure engine in most decks that can, and in order to be able to run it in the first place, you have to not need a normal summon effect, so that significantly reduces the number of decks that could play this engine in the first place. I'm going to say Branded as an engine is also C. Maybe it's a little bit better than the Adventure engine, but Branded Fusion and then a couple of targets and then something you can do with the couple of targets. I mean, you could easily splash this in the same way that you would splash Dragoon or DPE, but just with branded cards. And you can even make Dragoon with Branded Fusion pretty easily. So it is possible to run this as an engine, but I don't think it's actually that good. Branded as a deck, extremely good. Branded as an engine, not really that good right now. It's just for the Branded deck to do everything it does off of Branded Fusion, you have to have a lot of different fusion targets. So I'm going to say that Dragoon and DPE are both B tier engines. With Dragoon, typically you're running Red Eyes Fusion in some number with either Verte Anaconda or even 3 Red Eyes Fusion plus Dark Magician and Red Eyes Black Dragon. And DPE, you're typically running Destiny Hero cards that let you draw 2 cards and also make DPE. I think DPE is just a little bit better in most decks. I think some decks really benefit off of Dragoon's Omni Negate and Destroy effects, and I think they are totally viable to run right now, but I think there's better things you can be doing in most decks. If you're not explicitly on Guru control, you're basically never going to be playing Dragoon, and DPE is slightly more splashable, but it's not great. I'm going to say Bestial engines are A, and the main reason I'm saying this is because Malice really benefits off of the Bestial effects. So if you're running Lubellion and Branded Regained in your Malice deck, then you get a lot of value off of having all the Bestials in your deck at the same time. It is kind of a going first engine. Bestials are not great as hand traps right now. So if you're running Lubellion and Branded Regained and a bunch of Bestials, you're mostly trying to use it as extenders in your Malice combo. But on the basis that I've seen this played in Malice, in really heavy going first Malice builds, it does seem pretty strong there. If you can win coin flips, I can't win coin flips, but if you can win coin flips, then this engine is absolutely really powerful in Malice specifically, and so I think it deserves an A. Dear Servant and just Dogmatica engines in general, I'm going to put in B. Like, you see the Dogmatica monster that mills a couple of cards from your extra deck pretty often in Voiceless Voice. Like, that engine is pretty good in that deck because you don't need your extra deck at all. And being able to send 2 things from your extra deck to the graveyard and then send another one off of the Nadir Servant is pretty strong. But, like, you have to be playing a deck that doesn't need its extra deck, and most decks are really heavily dependent on the extra deck. So I think it's pretty solidly a B. But having said that, I think if you're playing that kind of deck, this is absolutely something you would want to consider running. Fiendsmith, I'm going to call this an S. You know, Fiendsmith Ryzeal is not the strongest deck in the format. In fact, out of the tier 1 decks, or like the meta decks of the format, it's the weakest deck of the format. But there is some benefit to running Fiendsmith in Ryzeal. So it's automatically an S, just on the basis of, like, it is a big part of the meta, Fiendsmith Ryzeal. And then, on top of that, the Fiendsmith engine is extremely splashable. Like, if you're playing tier elements, having the ability to make the rank 6 monster Pilgrim Reaper that mills 5 cards, that's incredibly good. And, like, even if you're not playing a deck like that, the Fiendsmith deck is, or the Fiendsmith engine rather, is really good in something like White Forest for being full White Forest combo if you do it correctly. And, like, yeah, you have to run a lot of bricks in order to make the Fiendsmith combo better than just Desiree or Caesar plus Paradise. But, like, even Desiree or Caesar plus Paradise is a pretty good reason to include the Fiendsmith engine. Like, for example, Tenpai can run the Fiendsmith cards on the basis of, like, you have to negate the Fiendsmith cards and then you don't have the negate for the Tenpai extender. So I think Fiendsmith is very clearly an S-ranked engine, even though I don't think it's the strongest engine you could be running in this format. I think it's pretty good. Goblin Biker. So this takes a couple of forms, but typically you're talking about 3-axis decks that are just trying to summon a bunch of rank 3 or rank 6 monsters. You know, a lot of the time they include Fiendsmith engines, and you're using the Goblin Biker cards as just like a way to get to some stuff. I don't know this engine that well, so maybe my rating is a little bit low. Maybe it could be a B instead of a C. But I have encountered it. It has been good. If you're reliant on Xyz monsters the way Ryzeal is, it's really good against you. And it does seem like a pretty good engine. I just, like, it might even be better than Branded or Adventurer as an engine. But I don't think it's actually that powerful. Like, 3-axis decks are definitely good, but and Goblin Biker is definitely one of the engines you will be including in your 3-axis decks, but I don't think it's so powerful that I'd want to rate it really highly. Like, it's really good against Xyz decks and not so good against other decks. Kashtira. So typically what you see with this one is Kashtira Unicorn, Kashtira Fenrir, Kashtira Birth, and Prime Planet, or Pressured Planet Race-Off. So, Unicorn is pretty good right now. Fenrir is always okay to run. Like, it's not a bad board breaker, and it's not a terrible card to summon out early going first. It conflicts a little bit with the Bestial engine or with Nibiru or with anything that puts a monster on your field before you get to summon. But it is pretty strong. Like, and a lot of the decks right now do suffer from Kashtira Unicorn's extra deck rip. So I do think Kashtira, and like a lot of the decks right now also suffer from the Kashtira Birth, banish 3 cards from the graveyard face down. So it is pretty good, but generally speaking, I don't think you're going to be running the Kashtira cards as an engine in a lot of decks in this format, just because like Fiendsmith isn't that strong as a deck, even though it's really strong as an engine, and that's the main home I would think for Kashtira Unicorn, is like making Moon and then having full Fiendsmith combo and whatever, and that stuff is just not as good right now as it has been in the past. Imseti and the King Sarcophagus stuff is either A or B. I think we're gonna put it at the top of B. Like if you're playing Tier Element, then having access to 2 8s in order to make Zombie Vampire is obviously really good. And if you're playing Crystron, being able to discard cards from your hand and also make an 8 to mill 4 is really good. But I think it's just it's a weaker version of what Millennium is doing. Like Millennium does everything that this engine does, but every card in the Millennium engine is actually useful to draw. Whereas like 3 of your 9 cards or 10 cards in King Sarcophagus decks are not actually that useful. So it's not a bad engine or anything, but I just think you'd almost always rather be playing the Millennium engine. Lightsworn. So this takes a couple of forms, and I haven't read these cards that often. Like I've read them when they're played against me, but I haven't sat down and like figured out the Lightsworn combos. But if you're playing a mill deck, then the Lightsworn cards are pretty good. Like I've seen Tier Element Lightsworn, and that looks pretty strong. And like they play different combinations of cards, but you know, just getting those extra mills in your tier deck is obviously really strong. And one of their starters is actually a Light Fiend, so that gets you into the Fiendsmith combo, which again mills more. So maybe it's even an A, but you don't see it as often as you see Millennium or King Sarcophagus. So I think I'm just going to put it as a B underneath the King Sarcophagus stuff. It's still a little bit more common than something like Dragoon or DPE, but I think like if you like the Lightsworn cards, now is a good time to play them, but you have to be playing a deck that wants those mills for some reason. And I mean the main one is Tier Element. So Math Mech engines. So you typically see this inside of Malice decks, and it's just like it's a hard to hand trap engine that will get you to a couple of interruptions pretty easily, maybe OTK pretty easily, and you only have to run a couple of bricks. You have to run the trap card and a couple of other cards that are still Cyber's monsters for the sake of your combo. Like it's not so bad. So I'm thinking Math Mech engine right now is probably an A. Maybe it's a B, but I'm gonna put it in A. Circular is a hell of a card, and the fact that even if you stop them from doing the Exceed Slop stuff they can still do Link Slop stuff, is pretty strong. I don't think Malice needs this engine the same way it needs the Bestial engine of some kind. Like Malice is always going to run some number of Bestials, and it may even run Lubellion and Branded Regained. It's only occasionally going to run Math Mech cards, and only if the player who playing it likes the Math Mech cards. But yeah, Math Mech is strong. It's not a bad engine to run in a Cybers deck. Like basically any Cyber Slop deck can take advantage of having Math Mech Circular in it. Circular is a hell of a card. And Diameter, not terrible to see either. Putting an extra negate up, not bad. I just feel like I feel like even Millennium with Zombie Vampire is slightly better in a going first Malice build. Um, Whereas the circular stuff is kind of like, if you like Math Mech, then now is not a bad time to run it in other Cyberus piles. Melodious. So typically what you do with Melodious is you make Baja, and then you kind of go from there into summoning a couple of monsters. This was really popular in Snake Eye format. It's not so popular now. And the thing is, I think Melodious as a deck is actually pretty strong, but Melodious as an engine is kind of like, why would I run that over, like, maybe it's even C, because it's like, I would definitely rather run DPE or Dragoon over the Melodious engine, and I'd probably even run Branded Fusion over the Melodious engine. But that doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. Like, it is a good engine to slot into some decks. You can definitely do some cool stuff with it. Baja is a hell of a card. Ostinato is a hell of a card. You don't have to have that many bricks in your deck in order to run it. It's just like, I feel like Melodious as a deck is more interesting to me than Melodious as an engine in other decks. Primite, I'm going to call that S. I mean, the main use for these cards is in Blue Eyes, but we've also seen it being used in Fiendsmith decks, and it's not bad in Fiendsmith decks. And you occasionally see it in other places. And it basically boils down to Drill Beam and Ether Barrel are crazy cards. Like, they give you immediate grind game. They give you real power level interruptions. They're really good into Maxi and Fuwalos and all the Mulch armies, because you only have to summon once to have everything, like, well, special summon. You only have to special summon once in order to have everything online. So I think Primite is actually a really solid engine in Master Duel right now, but I do think it's not quite as relevant as Fiendsmith is, but I think it is still solidly an S. Like, if you have space for a normal monster and you want to play the Primite cards, now is not a bad time for them. Runic. So mostly what I'm talking about here is running a few Runic spells and traps plus Hugin and maybe a couple of other Runic fusions, and just using them as non-engine. And that mostly comes about in stun, so I don't think it's that good. Like, I don't think stun is generally a strategy I want to be calling really strong. But, I mean, if you're not playing stun, you could still have reasons to play the Runic cards, and what the Runic cards actually do is really strong. Like, even if you discount their banishing from the top of the deck, which will occasionally screw the opponent, they're some of the best quick play spells ever printed. Like, literally, they are the best interactive quick play spells that have ever existed, and all you lose is your battle phase, which you don't necessarily need. So I think I'm going to put them in A. I think you could do really well with a few Runic cards in a pile at the moment. I think the difference between Runic and some of these other engines I've put above it is that Runic is, like, you have to be a deck that doesn't need its battle phase. You have to be a deck that wins without going to the battle phase. And a lot of decks, even though they aren't hyper-focused on the battle phase, they still do need the battle phase. So for Shaddoll, I've got two different examples. One of them is Shaddoll Fusion, which I think I'm going to call a D. Like, I don't think there's a lot of reason to run Shaddoll Fusion and a couple of Shaddolls in your Shaddoll deck to do something on the event you go second. Like, it's basically a worse board breaker. Like, it's honestly basically a worse board breaker. However, I feel like Winda engines are a little bit better than that. You know, engines where you have a couple of Shaddolls in your deck and you're playing tier elements, and your goal is just to add a Winda to the end board, or whatever, like that does seem pretty strong, because El Shaddoll Winda is still a really strong card. It's just, I wouldn't be running Shaddoll Fusion in this meta, unless I was playing Shaddolls, like unless I was actually playing a Shaddoll deck. And whereas I would consider Winda, because Winda's Floodgate effect is really strong, its protection effect is really strong, and you can easily slot it into a tier element deck without putting too many bricks in it, and get some extra bonus from milling the Shaddoll monsters that you put in your main deck, and make Winda relatively easily. So Winda seems pretty strong. El Shaddoll Fusion, or rather Shaddoll Fusion, doesn't look as good. Sky Striker engines, I'm going to put those pretty solidly in A. I'm actually going to put them at the top of A, though, because, if you're playing Tenpai Dragon and you have a Sky Striker engine, then that's really going to help you break boards and play Board Breaker Tenpai. It's probably the strongest version of Board Breaker Tenpai is the Engage version. And you can also play these cards in Malice the same way you can the Bestials. And I feel a couple of Bestials are usually going to make it into every Malice list. But Lubellion and Branded Regained and the stuff we're talking about when we talk about Bestials as an engine are actually pretty uncommon in the Malice list. And Sky Striker Malice does seem pretty strong into Ryzeal specifically. It is a really strong engine right now. I just don't think it's splashable enough to put into a lot of decks the way stuff like Primite or Fiendsmith are. Unchained engines. So if you're playing Fiend Slop, Unchained cards are really good. If you're playing a Fiend deck like Yubel Fiendsmith, or just Fiend Link that is mostly an Unchained deck or whatever, you're going to want some number of Sharvara and some number of the Unchained Souls, and you want to run the Unchained monsters in a lot of these Fiend Slop decks. And some number of, and basically what that boils down to is you're running some number of Sharvara and some number of extra deck cards, some number of the trap cards, and it can be pretty big engines to the point where it's almost an Unchained deck. Fiend Link is actually not a bad deck right now, and there are reasons to play Fiend Link, but you don't see it a lot. So I think bottom of B makes a certain amount of sense. It's good in Fiend decks, and as long as you're running some kind of Fiend Slop, it's actually really strong, but you basically wouldn't see it outside of pure Fiend decks. It's not like there's restrictions on it that prevent you from playing an Unchained engine and anything else. It's just you wouldn't generally want to run those cards except in Fiend decks. So it's not that splashable. It's pretty strong in the decks where you do want to splash it, and you only have to splash 2 main deck cards, 2 extra deck cards in a lot of the decks that splash it. You can splash more if you want, but the engine is very small, so that makes it really good in something like Yubel. But Fiend Link and Yubel are not that commonly seen, and they're really good going first, not that good going second. So I think Unchained as an engine is not particularly relevant right now. And the last engine we have is the Nightmare Throne Yubel engine. And how this one works is you activate Nightmare Throne, you destroy Spirit of Yubel, you summon Yubel, and then you can make Phantom of Yubel with those cards and get a negate on the board before you start your plays. Under 5 summons. It's not technically a negate, but it's basically a negate. And that's really strong, obviously, but it's again, you're not really going to see that outside of Fiend decks. Mostly you're going to see it in the Yubel deck. I have seen it since the format has changed, but it's not the most relevant thing in the world. And, like, it can be good. Definitely can be good. But it has its vulnerabilities, too. You know, like, it definitely... You're heavily reliant on a field spell resolving. You're heavily reliant on having your monster stay in the graveyard for long enough for you to get to the summoning conditions. So something like DD Crow or Bestial can screw up your combo. And it's really good at protecting you against Max C, provided people don't shotgun Max C. But because Ryzeal cards are so popular in the format, a lot of people are shotgunning their Max C or their Fuwalos. You know, they just fire it off right at the start of the turn. And if they're doing that, then this engine gets a lot worse. Like, it's really good if people are holding their Max C to try and draw a card, because then you go, well, your Max C is dead now, right? But in a format where everyone wants to shotgun it because of X Ryzeal, it just doesn't seem that strong. Alright, so that's my tier list. You know, there's a little bit of room for debate about some of these. And again, just to make it on this tier list, it has to be something that I've seen in high ladder play. Like, it has to be something that I've seen in master rank duels. So I've seen all of these since the format has changed, and they've all been varying degrees of successful. But yeah, I think this list is pretty solid. You know, you've got your Fiendsmith and your Primite super high. Then you've got Engage and Bestials and Kashtira and Millennium relatively high, alongside Mathmech, which is good in exactly Malice, and Runic, which is just mostly good in Stun, but genuinely a pretty good splashable engine. And then stuff like Branded Fusion and the Adventure Engine and Austin Auto, much lower. And then you basically shouldn't be running Shadal engines unless we're talking about like a couple of Shadal monsters and Winda in tier elements. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And have a good life. Bye!